I am with Brendan Yurik of Electric Royalties, and I just want to say a few words and have a bit of a chat. This is kind of the after doors meeting. And Electric Royalties is something that was brought to my attention actually by Stephen Gleason. And the Morgan Report has probably done better than most in the resource sector because we have favored the royalty companies. We've done that from the very beginning. And here was one that basically is the only one, at least at this scale, that does look at almost every battery metal you can name. And it's all in one tidy package. So Brendan, I could overtalk you, but I will give it to you. Why don't you outline for people that don't know, a lot about a royalty company very briefly, and then, of course, why you started something that no one else had thought of or at least enacted.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. So the royalty business model, I think it's the best business model we have in mining. It's a much lower risk model for investors. If you look at Electric Royalties, we're diversified. We have 72 assets in our company now. So we're not beholden to any one project really working out. We're diversified across 9 different clean energy metals, all of which have exponential growth forecasts moving forward, really over the next 2 decades. So that includes copper, lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, manganese, zinc, vanadium, etc. And so we're much more diversified than your typical mining investment. The other nice thing is, as a royalty company, once we have that royalty, which is basically a right percentage to cash flow from these mines when they go into operation, we don't have to put up any of the development costs to move that project forward. We don't have to put any of the capital costs to actually build the mine and put it into production. We don't have to build out a team, and take on that G&A in order to build out a mine either. Our G&A is very low. We're about $1.5 million a year. And once those royalties are in production, it's pretty much straight cash flow back to the company. And so lots of different advantages to a royalty company, and why we decided to do this now. Like you said, we're the only group out there really focused exclusively on clean energy metals. We see this as a very long-term opportunity. And, we've been quietly picking away at the best assets really in North America, Europe, and Australia that could be critical metals source of supply for the future over the last 5 years. And so it's been a really great entry point, and I think we're starting to see dividends, and we'll see that as we move forward here over the next few years.
Great. Before I forget, full disclosure, I own the company. I don't own the whole company. I have shares in the company, but it's upon me to always disclose that. So moving on, when you gave your speech, you're at the MIF, Metals Investors Forum, you made a couple comments I wanted to get probe a bit further. And one is, if I did the math right, the market cap of the company right now is something around 22 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is where we are. Yeah.
I never argue facts as long as I have the right facts. But in today's distorted world, you're not sure if you're getting facts. And then if you check a fact checker, you're really messed up. So let me quit with the jokes, but that's not a joke. So at 22 million market cap, you stated that, all things going away, they should. And in the mining business, let's face it, it's a tough one. And not everything goes as planned. But if it went along those lines, that we would have a royalty stream somewhere around 25 million in 5 to 7 years. And I thought that was very remarkable because of my math mind and how I think about cash flow and how you analyze a mining company, which is much different than how you analyze, a grocery store or auto dealer or something else. Anyway, on point, that's a hell of a lift. And that's something that I think I would say my members as versus others are looking for the long-term steady eddy. That's kind of the approach I've taken to the industry, a little different than, looking for that 10-bagger, around every corner, which does happen, but it's quite rare. So you fit with a lot of things, the royalty model, but would you comment on, what the growth rate looks like without having to dilute? That's the other thing that a lot of the juniors have to do. And you may, but normally royalty companies diluting, they're adding to the bottom line. In other words, you might spend 10 million to get a royalty that's going to be worth 30 million in 3 years. So are you diluting? No, you're not. You're accretive to the bottom line. And that's something that most discovery companies don't do. So I probably got you warmed up. Go ahead, fire away.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I appreciate that. So yes, we were to absolutely nothing, right? And we don't have to put up any more money for that to happen. We're not, managing these properties, to production. But yeah, if we were just to sit here and wait over the next 5, 6 years, we see cash flows getting up to that kind of $25 million range. Just this year alone, we see 4 of our royalties, which could either come back into production or enter production for the first time. And there's a lot of good reasoning behind that. And so, when you talk about 25 million cash flows down the road too, I mean, that's diversified across, 8 or 9 different assets. Again, so it's a much less risky, I think, investment way to go. But you get exposure to this entire space, the clean energy metal space. Royalties still get the same pricing upside. So if pricing goes up, that's directly proportional to the revenue increase that we will receive. So, I think from where we're at today, we've been here for 4 or 5 years. We bought a lot of royalties on assets that were 3, 4 years from production. And so a lot of those are starting to get into that, production zone now and over the next couple of years. And so it was a lot of legwork to get to this point, but I think now we should start to reap some of the benefits here over the next few years.
So I'm going to flip the coin on you. I'm going to be devil's advocate. It's not all, flowers and unicorns, as they say. One thing that I am not happy about, and this has nothing to do with you or the company, but the idea that's kind of proposed by most governments that this green energy is going to be a savior, whereas it's really not. I mean, I have a background as an engineer, not a mining engineer, but I've been taught to think logically. And I put up a video on Twitter recently. I'm surprised it didn't get taken down, but it's a little interview with a guy that's, I think he's a scientist, and a young journalist asked him, do we really want to go all electric by 2030 or 2035? I forget the year. And he says in a word, no. And he talks about, 500 million tons of earth having to be moved to produce the equivalent of 1 oil barrel in a battery and all this. And so basically he talks about the dynamics of you're exporting your carbon footprint on making the lithium battery or whatever. And I'm not against what you're doing. I want that to be clear. What I'm trying to point out is, I'll use my own basis here. It's the same idea. You couldn't put the world on solar. There's not enough silver to do it. You could mine out every ounce of silver we think we have in the earth, everything that's an above ground stockpile, and you couldn't do it. Same thing in the earth, in the battery metals. Certainly they're useful. Certainly they add, but there is that aspect that takes more mining. It takes more of a carbon footprint to get the stuff out of the ground. So how do you address that? Or does it even come up in discussions, or everybody just kind of starry-eyed and thinking that this is the way to go and that the carbon footprint doesn't exist if you do more mining?
Yeah, so I think I disagree with a lot of the stuff that's just generally said out there. First of all, we're buying royalties on assets that are in North America, Europe, and Australia, by and large. That's our focus. So they would be domestic source supply, and they would be shipping to factories that would be nearby, right? And that's kind of the big thing. That's why we believe it's important to have domestic sources of supply. And when you look at Europe, Australia, North America, where a lot of these gigafactories are coming up, if they did have to ship ore from across the world, then that is a kind of a different discussion than if they are shipping ore from, within the country. I think, 2020, 30, 2020, 2035 is ridiculous. People have asked me that question. We will not be 100% electric by then. They ask, people ask these questions. China hasn't committed to anything by 2050, right? So, for everyone else in the world to be doing it on a time frame 15, 20 years ahead of time, I think that's ambitious, but it is happening. If you look up at the renewable energy uptick and the global share of energy that it provides now, I mean, that's hitting all-time highs, and those technologies have only gotten better, over the last 5, 10, 15 years, solar being a great example of that. So I expect that'll continue to happen. When you look at the demand for all these metals, we're also talking energy storage. People talk electric vehicles all the time, but energy storage, in my mind, is just getting going. I think the first full energy storage facility for a city was actually just put in place this last year. And those are like, batteries for cities, right? So you think about how much metal you need for a car. My conclusion is that we're going to need all of these different technologies that we have coming and all the metals we can if we were going to meet our goals of 2035, 2040. Let's say everything goes well. I think the overall picture is that we don't have enough metal generally And we see that, especially across some of these lesser known metals that we cover, like, tin would be a great example. There's very few people in the world that care about tin, except we use it, in a lot of very important, things that we produce. So I think you're going to see that across the board. And I think that's really the big fundamental picture on why we're so excited to be picking up royalties on, these metals and future assets.
I've got one more question, because the way my mind works, we're kind of out of time. I do have a timeline, as you know, but so having said that, as the metals become more and more costly due to energy costs and scarcity and everything else, I think that portends a growth factor in the recycling of metals. Because right now, and I've said for years, it's like uneconomic to recycle a cell phone. And that was before the smartphone. At that time, it was true. With the smartphone, there's enough gold in the smartphone to recycle it. So it's economically feasible, and it's done quite a bit. So if you're going to smelt it down, you're going to get, the silver as well as the gold and everything else you can obtain. So as we go into this mode of more and more energy storage, do you think that will portend more and more recycling?
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal of this is we have to look at, we're looking at a new transition to clean energy, right? And at the beginning, there is going to be more mining. We need to pull more metal out of the ground because we haven't, over human history. But the end goal is that you do have a closed loop cycle where recycling can theoretically do 100%. And we are so far away from that today, to your point. But there are lots of different technologies that are working on that, lots of great people, smart people that are working on that and improving that. And I do think that'll take 40, 50, 60 years potentially, because you also have to get enough metal that you're going to be able to do that for the, the entire planet. But, that's why we see this as a multi-decade opportunity. But ultimately, 60, 70, 80 years down the road before we enter, the 21st, 22nd century there, we would want to have a closed loop cycle ideally. But yeah, we're far ways away, I think, from that today. But yes, you should see that more and more as we move forward.
I'm going to go ahead and conclude there. We certainly appreciate you coming to the Metals Investors Forum, and we have supported you, as you know, through the Morgan Report with our research and a recommendation, and we will continue the relationship. And congratulations on what you've done so far, and continued success.